Today, I want to talk about an extremely common symptom that I hear and that I have been guilty of buying into myself, which is the statement, I'm actually fine being alone. I'm actually fine just being by myself. And it's ironic because some of the most successful people that I've worked with who've gone on to attract a healthy relationship, this was their leading thought that they came in to our work with together. Their main belief system was, I'm just fine being alone. I'm actually okay with being alone. I would be fine if I got to the end of my life and I never met anybody else. Another variation of this is, I want a relationship, but I kind of don't. And I call this being in the middle. And it's kind of like the Goldilocks syndrome. Goldilocks syndrome, if you're familiar with that fairy tale, is that, I believe I'm getting this right, she's like, the porridge isn't too hot, it isn't too cold, right? It's kind of like you're in the middle. And that being in the middle is a very seductive place that we can camp out in for far too long. So I want to talk about, number one, how this belief system of I'm actually fine being alone gets instilled to begin with, the consequences of continuing to buy into that belief system, and then the signs that you're actually ready for change, that you're actually ready to start opening your heart to a different way of being in the world and a different way of relating in relationships, a different way of dating more emotionally vulnerable, being more exposed emotionally. And I want to just place a caveat here that this work isn't about how to go out and meet Mr. Right, although that is an outcome that happens. The biggest outcome of this work is how to truly live in love every day, how to love your life every day, even if right now it's not what you want, even if it's not how you want it to be. The biggest outcome is learning how to experience soaring levels of confidence, inner peace, a sense of being at home with yourself, and being able to welcome in increasing capacities of emotional intimacy with other people while being vulnerable in the process. Let's talk about how this belief system gets instilled in the first place. If you've been finding yourself saying, I'm actually fine being alone, and at the same time, deep down, you really do want to share your life with somebody, but you don't want to give up your inner peace. You don't want to settle. You don't want to sacrifice yourself because you've sacrificed and given up your inner peace in multiple other areas of your relationship. Or you might be listening to this right now and you've been alone for years. You've been single for years. And you're like, well, nah. It's all right. I'm fine. I've been single for 10 years. I'll just go another 10 years. I really want you to pay attention. The main way that this belief system gets instilled is through a series of exhausting disappointments, repeat mistakes in relationships, repeatedly feeling disappointed in yourself, not just by other people, but yourself. Repeatedly feeling betrayed, not by other people, although that is part of it, but by yourself, betraying yourself, going against your gut instinct on a repetitive basis. And just this stack of heartache, almost relationships, times you've obsessed about your ex, it's all the times you went back to your ex and it was the same thing. This stack of failure starts to mount up in your past. And this is the number one fuel or motivating factor that causes people, even though deep down they want to share their life and experience life with somebody on the path, they begin telling themselves, I'm actually fine just being alone. Is this stack of heartache, grief, disappointment, shame, guilt tripping herself, all of this, this emotional junk in the trunk, if you will, this emotional stuff, this garbage that she is still holding on to. The number one motivation for why people start telling themselves, I'm okay being alone. I'm okay if I never meet anybody else. And again, I run into this statement probably the most frequently. And again, ironically, the women who say this often wind up being the most successful in the program. And even though they come into the program going, I'm okay if I never meet anybody, somewhere halfway, 3/4 of the way through, they're like, oh, wait, actually, I think I do want I'm ready. I'm ready to welcome somebody in my life. And those are the people that get the best results. So what happens when we start telling ourselves, I'm actually fine being alone, is that we often turn to other parts of our life to give us that validation. And one particular area of life that a lot of the women I work with turn to are their careers. I have done this. Let me make a lot of fucking money. Let me go as high as I can in my career. Let me be the best that I can be in my career. And we start seeking validation from the role that we take on in our career, from the amount of money that we have in our bank account, the amount of money that we make every single month. We start identifying, over-identifying with that sense of validation. If you don't have, and you probably turn to a draining relationship when you did have somebody in your life as a sense of validation. I finally met somebody. I feel like everybody else now. I feel like I'm part of a team. This sense of external validation. And when that part of your life goes down the toilet inevitably because it's built on the wrong foundation, then we turn to our careers to give us that sense of validation. And here's where it gets sticky. At some point, and again, I've run into this with almost every single client that I've worked with, and I've also experienced this. At some point, your career and no amount of money that you have in the bank is enough to give you that validation. It's like a black hole. It's like no matter how much you consume, you still feel somewhat empty on the inside. And what often happens is that people get into what I call an apathetic state. Again, the porridge isn't too hot. Not necessarily, my life isn't horrible, but it's not great either. But I'm kind of like, "Meh." And that place becomes like a comfortable numb. So the biggest way that you find yourself here is through a stack of disappointment. The biggest reason often that you're telling yourself, I don't really want a healthy, I don't really want a relationship. I'm good if I just die alone, I'll be okay with that, is the stack of heartbreak and all of the ways that you have rejected yourself and abandoned yourself. By the time you hit 40 or beyond, like you've had basically half of your life living like that, and it catches up with you. So you start closing yourself off and turning to things like work, turning to things like achievements to give you that sense of confidence. I'm needed, I'm validated. But the catch is that anytime we rely on something outside of ourselves to feel validated, it will always be a losing situation, which moves me to the long-term consequences of this. So if we don't have a reckoning with ourselves, if we don't decide to change this, constantly walling yourself off from safe connection in relationships actually changes the chemistry in your brain. You develop lower and lower tolerance levels for emotional intimacy. And what I see happens a heck of a lot, especially with women that I've worked with, is that they turn to busyness to distract themselves. They turn to, I need to constantly stay on my phone. I need to constantly be planning the next project at work. I need to constantly be planning the next home renovation, my bathroom that I'm redoing. There's this constant, this preoccupation with busyness. And then I have so much on my plate. I have so much to do. My kid comes home from college next summer. I've got to do all this stuff to get ready for him. There's always this preoccupation with how much she has to do. And I get it. We're all super busy in our lives. But what this is doing is that it's keeping her nervous system and her brain in a state of fight or flight. She's not necessarily high in fight or flight, like she's running from a tiger, but it's enough that it keeps her from relaxing, from slowing down, from tuning into her intuition, from tuning into what she really wants, from learning how to effectively face and regulate her emotions and her feelings. From in a lot of time, all the time, people will tell me I don't trust myself, and I'm like, well, what are you doing in your life that's causing you to not trust yourself. And the people that I've worked with, they're so chronically busy and in a state of unhealthy coping through their phones, through work, through being absorbed in other people's problems, through continuing to maintain draining relationships, that they don't have the space, the inner space to develop her intuition. Trauma, when we go through trauma inside of a relationship, it literally alters our brain. Like if we looked at a brain scan of somebody who's had a traumatic relationship, there are two areas in the brain that are affected the most. The first one is the insular cortex, which is the part of your brain that is responsible for like inner knowing, intuitive hits, inner guidance, this sense of just knowing in your body that something is right for you or wrong for you. That part of your brain goes dark, or at a bare minimum, there's very little activity in that part of the brain. The other part of the brain that's affected when you have a traumatic relationship is what's called the Broca area, which is your area of speech. It's not safe to speak up when you might be left, or when you might be manipulated. It's not safe to do that. And so the part of your brain that's responsible for tuning into your intuition and the part of your brain that's responsible for speaking about how you truly feel, those areas of the brain, the lights go out. So that doesn't stop, and those areas of the brain don't suddenly start working perfectly again the moment that you divorce your narcissist. It continues happening. Over time, we rearrange our lives to match our inner state. So 10 years ago, you might have been walking on eggshells with your ex, but now that you're no longer in that relationship, you're probably working in a very demanding career, bending over backwards, feeling underappreciated, feeling resentful, feeling like people are further ahead of you and you're doing all of this work and nobody's recognizing you. This sense of like feeling on edge. You felt on edge with your ex, you feel on edge now. Who's the common denominator? So it's like your nervous system and your brain get like stuck in this arrested development state. And it changes. The longer you go like this, the less capacity you have. It's like your brain gets like narrowed down to like, I can only handle this much emotional connection. I can only handle this much. I can only handle this much. And what I often see happen is that women will start to date from this place and they will pick everybody apart, or they will get to a certain point where they've found somebody that they actually like, that there's some chemistry there. And then they'll get to a point where they start picking that person apart. So it's like their brain and their nervous system can only handle this much. And this was probably what you could only handle when you were with your ex, because that person wasn't capable of giving you any more. So you have to realize that the longer this continues, the more you start telling yourself the same old story of, well, I guess I'm actually fine being alone. Our beliefs influence our actions, or the actions that we don't take, and those actions and our beliefs influence the results that we get in our life. So if you're really thinking, if you're believing, well, I'm actually fine if I'm actually okay being alone, you are not going to take the necessary actions to bring in healthier, safer, more deeply connected relationships in your life. You're going to continue using whatever coping strategies you've been using to survive, to get through the day. And every single time, this leads to a more pervasive sense of stuckness. And the longer we feel stuck, the more we feel like we can't change. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you don't believe you can change, you're not going to take the actions to change. And then another year goes by and you're still in the goddamn same place. And you keep telling yourself, well, I guess I'm okay being alone. And then another year goes by and you're in the same place. So recognize that it's never about, and a lot of people will try to tell me it's about the men in my area. It's about dating apps are my enemy. I get it. Dating apps are dehumanizing. They have their downsides. They also have their upsides, but you're not going to see that if you're busy telling yourself there's no good men in my area. Men over the age of 40, men over the age of 50 have too much baggage, blah, 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 blah. Like, you're going to continue buying into the story of, well, I guess I'm just okay being alone. So there's a big difference between choosing solitude and giving up, resignation. And unfortunately, in the world that I work in, most of the women who come to me and tell me, well, I guess I'm okay if I'm alone for the rest of my life, they're in a state of resignation. They're in a state of collapse. And that's not the energetic state that's going to produce transformation in your life. Giving up you can't expect any results. I was talking with somebody recently who, when I drilled her right down to what was the most important question, which was, why is this a must for you to change? And she'd gone her whole life struggling with romantic relationships. She was, I believe, in her early 50s. Her whole life was behind her, and she had never had a healthy romantic relationship. And her rationalization for that and for staying the same was, well, I've made it this far. I guess I'll just keep going like this. This is a form of self-protection. This is a nervous system and a brain that's so used to staying in the familiar, even if the familiar is hurting you, that's how it's going to sound. Like, I've been alone for this long. I've messed up this many. Why even bother? And that was her state. And obviously I was like, well, I can't help you because you don't have what it takes. Like, if you come in with that energy, you're not going to get the results. So, and I'm not a fucking magician here. Like, you have to be ready for change. Somebody into change, and then I'll talk about signs where somebody has made the decision from a place of love versus feeling like they've forced a change. People who have come into this work and felt like they had to change were sometimes on the heels of another breakup, the heels of another toxic relationship. They did 5 years of therapy. They took years off of dating. They focused on their career. They climbed the ladder. They were even more successful, making even more money than ever. And then they're like, okay, I think I'm finally ready to get into another relationship. Start dating. First person they meet that they fall in love with, another toxic person, even worse than the one before. These people who come in, they're on the heels of another horrible breakup, another traumatizing breakup. Sometimes, while that can be a motivating factor for somebody to change, it's not the best because there's often an energy of desperation leading their choice. And whenever we make a decision or a choice based on desperation, desperate energy, what I find is that the transformation doesn't last. They go right back into their old bullshit. 6, 7 months later, a year later, they go right back into the crap. The people that make the biggest changes that are lasting and that stick have been out of a relationship for a while, and they have an inner knowing that something has to change for them. They've reached a point where they realize, man, I've spent the last 10 years single, and all of the people that I'm dating are still commitment phobic and don't choose me. I'm tired of this. Like, I'm really, really, like, my life has gone by like this, and I'm not going to let another year go by continuing to live like this. Or sometimes the catalyst is my child is about to go to college in 2 years and she's repeating my relationship choices. She's choosing assholes. She's only 16 and she's dating men that don't respect her. Geez, where did she get that from? And I've only got a couple more years with her before she goes off to college. And then, oh my God, I can't even imagine what she's going to be like in college, like away from home and like around peers and fraternities and all that stuff. So that's another big motivating factor that I see helps women make the decision from a place of like, I really need to do something about this. I'm sick and tired of living from this place. Do you see the difference? It's less about, well, my husband left me for another woman and now I guess I have to change. That's not the right energy. Anytime I've worked with somebody who's been in that energy, they don't show up, they don't do the work, they're not committed because they're still in a place of victimhood. The people that make the best changes have an inner knowing. There's a switch that's been flipped in them that is now pointing to, I cannot fucking do this any longer. It's an absolute fucking must that I have to change. I am not going back to my old dysfunctional ways. The woman that I told you about earlier that was like, I guess I'll just die alone. She hadn't made the decision to change. And she was also just recently off the heels of another bad breakup. So she was in the energy of like, I'm looking to escape my pain. There's a desperation energy. I'm looking to get rid of this. Anytime we're in that energy, we don't make positive changes in our lives. The decision to change, the signs that you're truly ready to change, the biggest one is that you have this core inner knowing that you can't keep going like this. Like you've built the success, but it feels empty. You've built the life, but it feels empty. You you've come so far from your marriage or your last relationship that basically broke you, and you've risen back to the top, but you still feel empty. And you're like, what am I missing? What am I missing? That's the key, the tipping point where you know that you're ready for change. And a lot of people avoid change as much as possible because there's this inherent belief that if I actually turn to face myself and face my wounds and heal them and learn how to feel my feelings, that I'm going to drown and it's going to ruin me. I'm not going to be productive anymore. Like, there's all of these stories that we make. And again, these stories are just protective mechanisms because your nervous system isn't trying to get you what you want. Your nervous system is trying to keep you safe. Your nervous system is trying to help you survive. And if you have survived all this time by telling yourself, I guess I'm okay if I die alone, whatever, like I want a good relationship, but I don't, like that in between, that like lackadaisical, I don't give a shit attitude, like that's your nervous system trying to keep you in the status quo. So if this resonated for you and you feel like, I feel called out, I feel I don't want to keep doing this anymore, then first step is to go and watch my free masterclass, Break the Cycle. Actually, I renamed it, Becoming the One. BethanyDotson.com/masterclass. If you've already on my email list and you don't need to resubscribe, you can actually go to Bethany Dotson, or you just don't want to get on my email list, totally fine. BethanyDotson.com/replay, and you can watch the masterclass immediately. That's going to walk you through the process that I use with clients to help them when they've had lots of therapy and they've talked about all their like relationship crap and their childhood and the fact that they're codependent, the fact that they're overfunctioning, and the fact that they have an avoidant attachment style and are anxious. They like know all of this, but they still haven't changed. And I'm going to talk about why those things don't work, at least long term, why they're helpful and they can get you part of the way to the result that you want, but they don't get you all the way to the result that you want. And I talk about the missing pieces that help you go from guarded and protecting your peace and distrustful of yourself and other people to loving your life, truly loving your life, not just having a life that looks good, but not feeling happy about it. And then loving your life during dating, loving the dating process, not dreading it, and learning how to attract a great relationship. I just had somebody write in recently, a client that graduated, found a great relationship, and she admitted it's still scary for me sometimes. So I want to preface this by saying that anytime you choose to change, fear is never going to go away completely. The woman that I'm speaking of found an amazing partner, but it was because she decided that she had to change. She had a young son, didn't want him to continue growing up, witnessing her choosing poor partners. She wanted him to develop healthy relationship behavior. She also realized she deserved a healthy partner in her life. She had a lot of motivating factors to change, and she couldn't be a victim anymore, but she chose to keep going even when she had massive disappointments in dating, and she did. She felt like quitting, but she kept going. And even though she's in a wonderful relationship right now, she still admits it still feels scary sometimes. There's still part of me that's like, I'm waiting for the next shoe to drop. So I just want you to realize that fear is never going to vanish completely. Even when you're in a healthy relationship, there's a whole other can of worms that happens. So the goal, however, is being willing to open yourself to the transformative power of not just about meeting Mr. Right, but about making choices in your life that are fueled from love, from loving yourself instead of fear and protecting yourself, which if you're listening to this right now, I can almost guarantee you're living in fear. So if this landed, if you've already seen the class and you're ready to have a conversation about whether or not Break the Cycle is right for you, then you can book a free breakthrough session. Go to bethanydotson.com/talk. Break the Cycle is not a course. It's a vehicle for change. Yes, there's assignments. Yes, there's activities, but it's an in-depth, high-touch, like customized path that we walk with you on. It's trauma informed. We use evidence-based methods for healing relational trauma when talk therapy hasn't worked. We help you uncover your limiting beliefs, the ways that you're protecting yourself. We help you take action and believe something differently. We help you show up consistently, but you do need to be very, very, very ready for that. Psychologically ready to go on that journey. bethanydotson.com/talk. You must be single or divorced, not hoping to go back with your ex. You must have already had at least 6 months, if not more is better, of traditional therapy. I want to see that you've already taken initiative to helping yourself get out of your own shit show, right? You're an action taker. You've already done some stuff. You're at 15,000 feet in off the runway. Now you're trying to get to 30, but you don't know how to get to that extra 30,000 feet off the runway. Therapy, blah, 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 blah. And you must be in a place, if you're recently single with your ex, you're not secretly hoping to go back or secretly hoping to reconcile with your ex. You're fucking done. If that sounds like you, book a free breakthrough session. Otherwise, continue listening until you feel like the switch has been flipped in you and you're ready for change. Take care, and I will talk to you soon.